In forensics, they say everybody tells a story. But here's the thing. Reading that story correctly, it's all about looking past what seems obvious. It's about finding the real clues. So let's dive into a bit of a forensic puzzle, shall we?
So here's how we're going to do this. I'm going to lay out a few cases for you, and in each one, there are going to be a bunch of clues, but only one is the real game changer, the one that separates a guess from the truth. The real question is, can you spot it? Let's find out. All right, first up, we're tackling something that movies and TV shows get wrong all the time, hanging. Trust me, there is way more going on here than you might think.
Okay, let's put it to the test. What is the characteristic feature of death by hanging? Is it A, those visible bruises around the eyes? B, maybe a total lack of external injuries? How about C, a fractured neck, the cervical spine? Or D, that pale, waxy look? Or maybe even E, no signs of suffocation at all? Think about it. Which one is the absolute telltale sign?
And the answer is C, fractured cervical vertebrae. If you got that, nice one. See, everyone assumes it's about suffocation, right? But in a lot of cases, especially with any kind of drop, the force is so intense it just snaps the neck. That severs the spinal cord, and that's what's instantly fatal. It's not about the lack of air. And this is why the other options are just red herrings. Yeah, you can get bruises around the eyes, but that's not the smoking gun. And you might not see much on the outside because all the real action, the critical damage, is happening internally. So what's the big takeaway here? When it comes to hanging, the spine tells the real story. All right, let's move on to our next puzzle. We're talking about blunt force trauma to the chest now. This is a tricky one because the deadliest injuries, they're often completely hidden from view. So picture this, a really bad car accident. There's a major impact to the chest. What's the primary thing that's going to cause death? Is it A, an aortic rupture, B, a collapsed lung, a pneumothorax, C, hemorrhagic shock, D, something called cardiac tamponade, or E, a pulmonary contusion? Which one is the one that kicks off the whole fatal chain of events? And the primary killer here? It's A, aortic rupture. This is one of the most brutal and fastest ways to die from chest trauma. And the scariest part? It happens deep inside, often without a single clue on the outside. So what is an aortic rupture? Well, think of your aorta as the body's main fire hose, blasting blood away from the heart. Now imagine that hose gets hit with immense force. It tears. And when it tears, you've got catastrophic internal bleeding. We're talking game over in just a matter of seconds. And this is such a great example of the difference between a cause of death and a complication. Sure, a collapsed lung can happen, and hemorrhagic shock, absolutely. But the shock isn't the cause, it's the result of the bleeding from the aortic rupture. The rupture is the first domino. It's the event that starts it all. Okay, for our last section, we're staying in the world of high-impact forces. We're going to look at two things. First, the absolute havoc it wreaks on internal organs, and then we'll zero in on the head and the cascade of injuries that happen inside the skull. Okay, think high-speed impact again. The body gets slammed with just unbelievable force. Yeah, you're going to see scrapes and bruises on the surface, that's a given. But what's the signature fatal injury happening on the inside? Is it A, abrasions and bruises, B, dislocated joints, C, torn organs, lacerations, D, deep tissue bruises, or E, the spinal cord getting compressed? And the answer is C, organ lacerations. The force is just so great it can literally rip solid organs, like your liver or your spleen, apart. And that, of course, leads to massive internal bleeding, hemorrhagic shock, and that's very often the final cause of death. All right, now let's get specific and focus just on the head. When there's blunt force trauma to the head, what's the single most common injury that investigators find? Is it A, an epidural hematoma, B, a skull fracture, C, a subarachnoid hemorrhage, D, an intracerebral hemorrhage, or E, a bruise on the brain itself? This one might actually surprise you. The most common injury is B, a skull fracture. Now, you might be thinking, wait, isn't it the bleeding or the brain damage that's the real problem? And you're right, that's what's often fatal. But the fracture itself is the first thing to happen. It's the first domino in that whole tragic chain reaction. Yeah, this really nails that relationship. All those other scary things, the bleeding, the bruising on the brain, they're usually a direct result of the skull breaking in the first place. The fracture is the primary injury. The brain damage comes next. It's secondary.
Okay, one final piece to this puzzle. Let's say we know there's a serious brain injury. What's a common sign on the outside of the body that tells us there's dangerous pressure building up inside the skull? Is it A, a high fever? B, pupils that are wide open and don't react? C, spinal fractures? D, bleeding all over the body? Or E, a swollen abdomen?
And that critical external sign is B, dilated, non-reactive pupils. You know how in the movies a doctor shines a little light in someone's eyes? They're checking to see if the pupils get smaller. If they just stay wide open, that's a huge red flag that something is going very, very wrong inside the brain.
And it's all because of something called increased intracranial pressure. I mean, think about it. The skull is basically a sealed box. It can't expand. So if the brain starts to swell or bleed after an injury, the pressure inside just skyrockets. It's kind of like pumping way too much air into a balloon that can't pop. That intense pressure starts to crush the brain and messes with the nerves that control your eyes, making the pupils blow wide open and stop working.
Okay, so we've worked our way through these forensic puzzles. What are the big takeaways? Let's quickly recap.
So, here it is, your forensic cheat sheet for reading the body. The lesson here is that the obvious clue is rarely the whole story. For hanging, it's all about checking the spine, not just the neck marks. For blunt chest trauma, you've got to suspect that hidden aortic rupture. That's the real killer. For a high-velocity impact, look for those devastating organ lacerations. And for head trauma, remember, the skull fracture is the first step, and the eyes give you a critical look at what's happening inside. Every single one of these clues, it's how forensic experts go from just guessing to knowing the facts. It's how they give a voice to people who can't speak for themselves anymore. And it really makes you think, doesn't it? What other secrets are locked away in the human body, just waiting for science to find the key?